Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 69 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, I've got this giant stack, a big giant stack of topics for camera position, and I organized them, sorted them out with the eye toward recording a whole slew of them during the Christmas holiday when I'm not teaching. And first one on the stack was a recommendation or a suggestion from a podcast listener, Marcio. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Marcio, who had suggested that an interesting topic might be to take a look at the idea of Gestalt Theory in understanding and practicing photographic composition. And I thought, that's a great idea and something that I know at least a little bit about, and then went to starting to research and take a look at what I would use as material for talking about Gestalt theory and composition, and realized that I, in fact, have talked about Gestalt theory and composition way back in camera position number 26. And yet this is a pretty good topic for conversation and discussion relative to the idea of composition in photography. So I thought I would revisit it and take a look at it from a slightly different point of view. In fact, over a couple of podcasts. And in fact, what we'll do in this episode is talk about closure and continuance. And then we will come back at a later time and talk about similarity and proximity. These four things, closure, continuance, similarity, and proximity, are four of the basic concepts of Gestalt theory in terms of visual psychology. First, just a quick description of what it is that we're talking about. Gestalt is a description, a general description for concepts that make unity and variety possible in design of all sort, whether it's photographic design or typographic design. And it's a German word that roughly translates as complete or whole or form. And Gestalt theory originated in Germany in the 1920s, and it's this form of psychology that's interested in higher order cognitive processes. So what we're doing is looking at the way in which the brain functions and how the brain takes a look at visual stuff. And one of the concepts here is that the visual world is extremely complex. There's a lot going on visually in the world, and Gestalt is a way of describing how the mind functions relative to trying to find references to understand a very complex visual world. And it turns out that we can use some of these concepts in photographic composition. So the one that we had talked about way back long ago in an earlier episode of Camera Position is the idea of closure, that the mind supplies missing pieces in a composition. And the idea that an object is really a group of simple items that the mind puts together as a single entity. An example would be that we all kind of recognize a face because we understand the way in which a face is constructed. And even if somebody hides some part of their face, say behind sunglasses or whatever, we have some idea of what the face looks like, even though we can't really see all of it, because our mind supplies those missing parts. And a really kind of a great way of using this in photographic composition is the idea that what we should be doing is not supplying every piece of the information that the visual person looking at our picture needs to have, but rather engage them in the process of completing the object. So I've got a couple of examples here. One where that I've pulled out is an image that I shot in Ascoli Piceno, a beautiful town in the region of the Marches, or Le Marche in Italy. And this picture of a clock where the circle of the clock I have cropped into in a rather dramatic fashion on two sides in such a way that I don't show you the entire circle. And the idea is not the quantity of information, but the quality of information that lets a viewer read the image. So it's a little like having somebody kind of complete the puzzle and the satisfaction of completing that puzzle. So this idea of closure or filling in pieces that are missing is an important concept in the idea of Gestalt theory and composition. And we can use it in many different ways. We can continue to use it not just in circles that are cropped off, but in all sorts of different ways that allow us to complete the visual experience, understanding a little bit about, gosh, I know the way this pediment top on this building works, and I understand how that's going to become a completed thing, even though the completion is outside of the frame. So leave the audience a little bit of room to complete their own picture within your compositions as you make photographs. Another concept here is continuance, which is in some ways similar to closure, but it describes a way of directing the viewer's attention when they're looking at a composition, based on the idea that once you start looking in a particular direction, you'll continue to look in that direction until you see something that's interesting or something that is significant. Sort of the common strategy in photographic composition would be something like paths, rivers, roads, railroad tracks, rows of trees, all sorts of different things that would lead the eye in one direction. And the notion that once the eye is moving in that direction, that's the way it will work. And in Western society, we typically tend, because we read from left to right, we typically want our photographic images or our visual images to also read from left to right. So the direction of the eye moving from left to right across the picture is far more comfortable to us than when we're forced to read right to left or bottom to top. As an example of that, I have here this photograph that I made last summer of some tools. These are wood splitting tools that my grandfather used to use, and now I use them. My grandfather taught me that a man who chops his own wood is twice warmed, something I've taken to heart. But in any case, here is this photograph, which I initially conceived in one visual direction. And in working with it, I noticed that if I flopped the image over and moved it, just flipping it left to right, that what happened was that the image is a lot easier to read, a lot easier to visually understand. So here I've included it in the enhanced podcast, both in its original form and also in the flipped version. And I think you'll probably agree that the flipped version reads a little bit more easily than the other one does. So perspective, lines of perspective, like a picket fence disappearing into the distance, can also be very, very useful in terms of directing our eye in a particular way. So thinking about how other people will look at this image based on the continuance of the direction of vision. So some basic things about Gestalt theory, and we will come back and talk about proximity and alignment in the next episode of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com